Working on a project where I'm replacing two fluorescent light fixtures in my basement with ceiling fans. I did a lot of research and you can buy fans that come remote control equipped, but the ones I found, the online reviews are pretty critical. Appears the retailer would take a brand name fan and then bundle it with a third-party remote system, and the reviews of that were not good. So I researched getting fans that are pull chain controlled and then converting them over to remote. And that's what I'm doing. And I read the instructions for both. And on the remote, it says you have to start with lights are on, make sure the fan speed is set to high, then turn the power off, and then install the remote. So that meant I cannot just install the remote as part of the initial installation of the fan. This video is strictly about the installation of the remote. Now this product comes with the transmitter, which is what we call a remote. Comes with a cradle that can screw over a wall switch. It comes with the receiver. This is the part that goes into the fan. I had to buy two of these because I needed two of these. It gives me an extra one of these, but that's okay. It then comes with installation instructions. It then comes with a little hardware pack that contains the wire nuts and then the battery for the remote. When you read the instructions, the wiring diagrams are always rather simple. In my situation, I've got two fans, and the wires running to the fan not only operate the fan, but they go off and run off to other parts of the basement. So in one outlet box, I have 3 non-metallic cables. Each cable contains 3 wires. So in that box, I've got 9 wires coming from the house. In the other box, I also had 3 non-metallic cables. 2 of the cables have 4 wires and one has 3. So in that box, I actually have 11 wires coming from the house. So I thought I would do a very simple diagram explaining what my particular situation is. It may or may not be applicable to you. So coming from the house, I might say coming from the ceiling, in each of the outlets, I have what I call permanent hot. These are wires that are energized whenever the circuit breaker is on, regardless of the wall switch. These wires are energized only when the wall switch is on. These wires are your typical neutral, and these are your ground. For my particular situation, I am leaving these alone, so I am taking them out of picture. Coming out of the fan, on my particular models, you get a grounding wire from the bracket, grounding wire from the down rod, and then you'll have 3 wires coming from the fan. I took the 2 grounding wires and connected them to the grounds coming from the ceiling. I then took the neutral wire from the fan, connected it to the neutral coming from the ceiling, and again, what's coming from the ceiling is multiple ground wires, multiple neutral wires, and in one case it's a single switched hot, the other outlet it's 2. The reason it's 2 is because that one feeds over to the second fan. I take the 2, if you will, hot wires from the fan and connected them to the switch. So one wire feeds the fan motor and the other wire feeds the lights on the fan. So when the switch is on, both these lines are energized. Power is going to the fan and the lights. On the fans, I control if the fans are on or the lights are on by pull chain, and if the fans are on, which speed by the pull chain. When we install the remote, the receiver is going to sit in between the wires coming from the ceiling, the house, and the wires coming from the fan. Now if you notice on the receiver, there is no grounding wire. So in this application, this essentially doesn't change. The grounding from the house stays connected to the grounding from the fan. Now on this connection, the white wire from the receiver is going to get connected to the neutral coming from the house, and the black wire from the receiver is going to get connected to the switched hot coming from the ceiling. As you may recall, in my particular fan, the blue and black wires coming from the fan are the hot wires. One controls the fan motor, the other controls the light fixture. Now, per the instructions, that the blue wire from the fan connects to the blue wire from the receiver, and the black wire from the fan connects to the yellow wire from the receiver. So the way the fan gets energy, if you will come from the house through this black wire into here. The remote then controls the energy or the electricity that gets to the fan. One operates the lights, the other operates the fan. And this particular remote, the center button is lights, on and off, and you press it and hold, it'll actually work the dimmer. This triangle shaped thing, you press 0, I don't know if you can tell 0, there's a 0 in the middle, that turns the fan on. 1 sets at the lowest speed, 2 at the next speed, 3 at the highest speed. Now we still have the white wire coming from the fan. This wire stays connected to the neutral coming from the house. So step 1 of the installation is to actually put the fans in the high speed and the lights on. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'm hoping I can do all this without having to take the blades off. Step 2 says to drop the canopy. Well, since I was installing these, I knew I was going to do the remote. I didn't even bother connecting the canopy. So if you look on the left, my pointer is pointing at the canopy, and you can see it's not near the ceiling. Same thing on the right. I don't know if you can see the pointer, but it's the canopy's right there and all the wiring's right there. So at this point, I'm going to turn on the wall switch. What it wants is lights on and fan set to high speed. This particular fan is 3 speeds. First pull of the chain should turn it on to high speed. Now what we do is we cut the power. You do not turn off the fan, you do not turn off the lights. You cut the power. In my case, that's turn off the wall switch and then go to the circuit breaker panel and throw the circuit breaker that feeds these two. Is that redundant? Well, if you recall, I've got what I call permanent hot wires up in there that is not controlled by the wall switch. So those wires are energized. So at this point, I'm going to go turn off the circuit breaker. I don't know if you can tell these connectors, they're the WAGO connectors. Since I knew I was going to have to wire up the fan, get it set to the proper speed, light on, shut everything off, and then unwire it and put in the remote and rewire it, I went ahead and changed all the connections in both boxes to these WAGO connectors. What I need to do is the white needs to go to the other whites, the black needs to go to the switch black, and the blue goes to the blue from the fan, which is this blue right here. So let's get started here. I'm going to take one of my 3-way connectors and just open it up. I'm going to remove these two. This one is coming from the fan, and this white one is coming from the receiver. If you don't have these kind of connectors, this is where you use those wire nuts. I'm not a big fan of wire nuts when working with stranded wire. This, of course, is the antenna. It doesn't get connected to anything. So everything's been connected. Now, if you're tempted to, there's an opening in the ceiling and the box here. If you're tempted to shove your wires in that opening, don't do that. That would be against code. They need to be enclosed. This is the bracket that came with the fan. This is the top of the down rod, this is the canopy. What I'm trying to do is clear away as much as that as possible, and then stick the remote right in there. This is the antenna wire. Let me just kind of get it. I'm not going to pull on it. I think it's in there. Let me just do a quick fit of the canopy. Also look down here when you're doing it to make sure you're not pinching any wires down in this area. And I feel, as I do it, I feel back here to see if I got any wires sticking out. Now that everything is connected, let's review some close-ups so I can show you the exact connections for each wire. In the upper left corner, you can see the white antenna wire. That wire is not connected to anything. I also point out the mounting bracket and the actual receiver. In the lower left, you would see how I connected the ground wires. I have a pigtail from the ground, which is coming from the house. And I'll actually show you a separate image of what I mean by pigtailing. And then the wire in the middle of the connector is the ground from the bracket, and the wire at the bottom of the connector is the ground from the down rod. As a reminder, the receiver itself does not have a grounding wire. Down on the upper left, you'll see where the switched hot wire from the house, which is in the top of that 2-port connector, and at the bottom of that specific connector is the black from the receiver. The connector below that has the black wire from the fan connected to the yellow wire from the receiver. And on the right hand side, we see how the neutrals are hooked up. I have a pigtail coming from the neutral from the house. That's in the top part of that 3-way connector. In the middle of that connector is the white wire from the fan, and the bottom of the connector is the white wire from the receiver. Then at the bottom on the right is the blue wire from the fan is connected to the blue wire from the receiver. All right, in terms of syncing it up, the first thing you do, of course, is put the battery inside the remote. Then you turn the power on. I've already gone up and turned on the circuit breaker, but I left the wall switch off. I'm going to read the next step and then I'm going to turn on the wall switch. Within 3 minutes of restoring power to the fan, press both the fan off button, that's that 0 button right in the middle, and the high button for at least 4 seconds. Your fan will turn on low to indicate successful syncing. If it does not, turn off power to your fan, wait 1 minute, then try again. The high button is 3, so I'm going to push 0 and 3 simultaneously for at least 4 seconds after I turn on the power. So you should hear the click when I flip the switch. Alright, so my pairing attempt is not working. The remote syncs with one fan but not the other, and it varies. Sometimes it syncs with the one on the left, sometimes it syncs on the one on the right. Contacted Hunter and they said try and sync them individually, which is the technique you would use if you want to use one remote with one fan and the other remote with the other fan. What I'm trying to do is sync both fans to a single remote, but they said if I do it individually, that should work. Okay, well, pairing them individually worked, and let me see if I can explain what I did. If you recall in the diagram, the black wire from the receiver I connected to my switched hot wire. What I did was I cut all power off at the wall switch and at the circuit breaker. And then on the left fan, I disconnected the black wire from the receiver from the switched wire. And I just used a wire nut temporarily to cover that bare end in the wire because I didn't want any bare ends. and then I restored the power. Turned on the wall switch and I pressed 0 and 3 and it synced up with the fan on the right. Then I turned off the wall switch. I then got into fan on the right and pulled the black wire from the receiver and disconnected it from the switched hot wire. I then went to fan on the left and reconnected the black wire from the receiver to the switched hot wire. I then went to the wall switch, turned it on, synced it, turned off the wall switch, went to the fan on the right and reconnected black wire from the receiver to the switched hot wire. So at this point, both fans are connected. All right, the wall switch is on. I'm going to press the light switch. I'm going to press the light switch off. I'm going to press 1 on the remote. I'm going to press 2 on the remote. I'm going to press 3 on the remote. I'm going to press 0, which is in the middle of the remote. Got a successful synchronization to a single remote. So after I got the remote, the single remote synced up to the 2 fans, I checked the features, but I was having an issue with the dimming feature. Now, it clearly says in the instructions that if you install compact fluorescent bulbs in the fan, and in this particular fan, that's the kind of bulb that it came with, that the dimming feature will be turned off. I did not install compact fluorescent bulbs in these fans. They're actually LED dimmable bulbs. But here's the instructions. Quickly press the light button to turn the lights on and off. Quick press. Hold the light button to raise and dim the light level. Press and hold. You can see that the remote is activated, but you can see that the bulbs are not being dimmed. So I went to the Hunter website, looked in their FAQs, and it had a different set of instructions, and I'll read them to you. For the 5 series fans. My 2 fans are the Hunter Newsom, and they are in the 5 series. It says turn the light off and then back on again. Within 3 minutes, hold down the fan off button while pressing the light button twice on the handheld remote. I'm going to press the fan off button and then press this twice. Once the dimming feature is enabled, hold down the light button to dim. And there it goes. And it's brightening up again. So for these fans and this control, that's how it works. That's how you set the feature. What I want to check now is to make sure that I can just turn them on and off. And the good news is it's when they're turned back on, they are turning back on at the same dim level. Alright, the last feature offered by the remote is what they call the safe exit feature. Let me read the description to you. The safe exit program gives you about 30 seconds of light when you turn the lights off to exit the room before the lights go out. It says press the fan off button for at least 3 seconds to initiate the safe exit mode. The lights will flash for visual confirmation. I'm just going to press and hold the fan off button until the lights blink. Alright, that's initiated the safe exit feature. What it looks like it's doing to me, because my lights were already dimmed, took them up to full brightness, and then it's starting to dim them again. And as you can see, they've already dimmed, and it did do it within 30 seconds. They do make a note, if you have compact fluorescent bulbs in there, the dimming feature is disabled, therefore the safe exit feature is disabled. Now this is the wall switch that controls power to the fans. What I'm going to be doing is mounting the remote control here. Now the way it works is you don't remove the switch and you don't remove the faceplate. It actually goes over it. And there's room inside for the switch. Now if you have a rocker switch, then my understanding is that these two tabs come out and you attach it this way. So first, to make it easier to work, this part actually lifts out. Don't screw it too tight. Okay, we'll leave the switch on, and I'm just going to permanently leave it on. And then the control goes right in there. What I want to try to explain here is how the electrical box was originally wired up, and why I decided to switch from wire nuts, which is what you see here, to the WAGO connectors. Well, this was how things were originally done. All the wires were twisted together and then secured with a wire nut. This of course is the grounding wires, and in the box I had 3. The issue I was running into is the box originally was non-metallic, and so when we got it upgraded to a ceiling fan box, it was metal, which I added a ground to. And then we had the ground coming from ceiling fan bracket, and then the ground coming from the ceiling fan's down rod. So that's 3 more wires that would have to be essentially twisted onto these. Problem is, I can control this one, so I made it a solid copper wire, but the ground rods from the bracket and down rod are not copper. In fact, they're stranded aluminum. Whenever I'm required to connect aluminum and copper wire, I try not to let them wrap around each other. Try to connect them without them actually touching. Also, I knew that to do this project, I would have to wire up the fans, make sure they're working, get it on high speed, get the lights on, then disconnect them, which if I had twisted it, it'd be untwisting the wire nut, untwisting the wire from the other wires, securing them, adding the remote, twisting everything together. And I just don't like twisting stranded wires as much as this project was going to require. So I decided to go with the WAGO connectors. So the way I did it, I'm just going to show you on the grounds. I would have the power cut off at the circuit breaker, and in this case I had it cut off at the light switch as well, which is kind of redundant, but I took the wire nuts off. And then I would have to untwist this. Generally, I would need pliers, like my Lyman pliers, to undo this, but this is just a mock-up, so the twist isn't that strong. And then I would take the pliers and straighten out the wiring so that it would fit correctly inside this type of connector. It doesn't have to be perfectly straight. Then you just open up your connectors, and then you'll insert them, close it. Now straightening out these wires will be a whole lot easier when they're attached to the cable, because it's just easier to handle that way. So let's pretend that this is a neutral that I unwound from other neutrals. Typically when wires are wound and then wired nut together, you're going to have a lot of exposed wire, and when you insert it into the connector, you're going to have wire exposed, which is not a good thing. Not for neutrals and not for hots. Let me show you what you can do on the side of this connector. It's showing you the length of wire that it wants. You can put your wire up to there, mark it where you have excess, cut off that excess, now that seems really short, but these connectors don't need a lot of wire to do their job. So you can see through the transparent back that the clamp, which is this part of the connector right there, is making full contact with bare wire, which is a good thing, but there's enough insulation inside the connector to prevent accidental contact with other metals. So that's how I go about converting over from wire nuts to connectors. If you decide to go with the WAGO connectors, let me just show you a couple of do's and don'ts on how to do it. If you look at the close-up and the bottom wire, that is what you want. You want the clamping part of the connector to have full contact with the wire, and you want enough insulation going into the connector to prevent accidental contact of the wire with anything else. Now, if you're connecting the bare copper grounding wire, then of course there is no insulation. Now the middle wire's got too much insulation, and so when the connector clamps on it, it's clamping on the insulation, and therefore there will be no contact. The one on the top, too much insulation has been removed, and so while the connector is properly clamped down on the metal, there's too much exposed metal that could accidentally come into contact with something else and cause an electrical problem. So I still had 3 more wires to go. I had the wire from the box, and then I had to add the 2 grounding wires, and I decided to do that with a pigtail. A pigtail is really nothing more than an extension. So I got me some appropriately colored wire, added it to the connector, and at the other end added the connector. And then for the grounding wire, I'm just going to go ahead and remove this just to give me some room here. So if this were the grounding wire from the bracket, I put it into here. And then the grounding wire from the down rod, put it in here. A reminder that all the wires from the receiver and all the wires from the fan are aluminum. And again, this pigtail would end up going into here. I hope this video has been useful to you, and thank you for watching.